Good morning, grade 10s. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Today we're going to work through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, also looking at the tree diagram and how we use the tree diagram when we have more than two things happening at a time. Okay, when we have two things happening at a time, we normally use the two-way diagram, and when we have three or more things happening at the same time, we look at predictions and all the possible outcomes. Okay. So the question is, draw a tree diagram to represent all the possible outcomes of um, when flipping three coins. That doesn't make such nice sense, but let's just have a look at it. Okay, so you are flipping three coins. Okay, when you flip a coin, remember the outcomes can be heads or tails. Okay, and now what is happening? You're flipping a coin. You are noting, it landed on a heads. Then you flip again. Oh, now it landed on a tails. Then you flip it a third time, and then it lands on tails again, for instance. So you want to list all the possible outcomes, all the variations that can happen when flipping three coins. Okay, so what you do is you're going to make little branches, hence the tree diagram. So you're going to have a look at coin number one. You flip coin number one. So what are all the possible outcomes that can happen? You can either flip a heads or it can land on a tails. So you write coin number one here on top, your heading, and you list all the possible outcomes that can happen with flipping one coin. All right, so then next to it, you write coin number two and attached to each and every previous outcome, you're going to now list all the possible outcomes that can happen again with coin number two. Okay, so you can, in coin number one, you could have thrown a heads, and then after that, it could have followed again with a heads or a tails. Or with coin number one, you could have first flipped the coin and it landed on tails, and then you can have from there again with coin number two a heads or a tails. So you list all the possible outcomes with your second coin that you are flipping, and you are linking them to each and every previous outcome from the first or from the previous coin that you flipped. Okay, then for coin number three, you do exactly the same. Again, if you flip coin number three, it can land on heads or tails. But you have to list all those possible outcomes linked to the previous outcome. Linked to the previous outcome. Both of them linked to the previous outcome. Both of them linked to the previous outcome. Okay, so it looks like a lot of options. And remember, how do we work out what are the total number of outcomes that there are? So for coin number one, the total number of outcomes was two things, heads or tails. So 2 times 2 is 4 times another 2 is 8. Okay, so there should be 8 possible outcomes. All right, so just to go over it again, coin number one, heads, tails. Coin number two, linked to every previous outcome. You list all the possible outcomes now. Heads, tails, heads, tails. And also for coin number three, again, linked to the previous outcome. All the possible outcomes for coin number three. Heads, tails, heads, tails. Okay, etc. Okay, so now we want to list all the possible outcomes that we can get. So your outcomes are as follows. So please follow the branches very carefully. You can either flip a heads, followed by a heads, followed by a heads. Heads, heads, heads. Or you can flip a heads, followed by a heads, followed by a tail. Heads, heads, tail. Then you can even highlight your path that you are going. Okay, so that you don't forget a path or maybe skip a path. Okay, so heads, 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 tails. Then you can have heads, tail, heads, or heads, tail, tail. Then you can have tail, heads, heads, tail, heads, tail, or tail, tail, heads, tail, tail, tail. Let me just quickly see if I can maybe pointer options, highlighter. Okay, so if you want to, heads, 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 or heads, heads, tails. You see by highlighting, then you can't forget one. Heads, tail, heads, heads, tail, tail. Tail, heads, heads, tail, heads, tail, tail, tail. All right. And now, when you have all your possible outcomes, there's questions that can be asked from your from the results that you've drawn up, all your outcomes that you've gotten. And I want you to also please copy these questions in your book, in your exercise book, with the answer as we are doing it together. Okay. So first of all, they ask you, how many outcomes are there all together? So remember, like I said, you can go count them as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or without even writing the outcomes, you could have done it by 2 times 2 times 2, which gives you 8 different outcomes. Okay, question number 2. What is the probability of flipping either a heads, heads, heads or a tail, tail, tail? Okay, so if you have a look there, there's heads, heads, heads and tail, tail, tail. So your answer should be 1, 2 out of the 8 possible outcomes. Okay, so you write 2 over 8 and please always simplify your answer as then a quarter. Question number 3. What is the probability of the coins landing on a tail, a heads, and then another heads? So tail, heads, heads, and that is in any order. Okay, so just have a look again. 1 tails and a heads and a heads. So 1 tail and 2 heads. But they told me in any order. So we are looking for where there's 2 heads and 1 tail. 2 heads and 1 tail. 2 heads and 1 tail. And I think that's it. 2 heads and 1 tail. Yes. So our answer should be 3 out of 8. Let's have a look. That's it. 3 over 8, and that cannot be simplified. Question number 4. What is the probability of the coins landing on a tail first? So it must be a tail first, followed by either a heads or a tail. So it doesn't matter with what it follows with. It should just land on a tails first. So if you look, all of those are tails first. Okay, over here it was all heads first. So over here, all the tails first, followed by anything. It doesn't matter, a heads or a tails. So it should be, your answer should be 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 8. Now say 4 out of 8, and simplified is a half. Okay, let's have a look at the last question. Last question is, what is the probability of the coins landing on a double heads or tails first? Sorry, on a double heads or tails first, followed by anything else. So it must be a double heads or a double tails, followed by anything. So we are looking for the first 2 outcomes must be the same, either heads, heads, or tail, tail. So that one has the 2 heads first, followed by anything. Can you see that? This one also, 2 heads, followed by anything. Okay, but there we've got heads and then a tails. A heads and then a tails. No. Tail then a heads, tail then a heads. Aha, tail and a tail, followed by anything. And a tail and a tail, followed by anything. So how many are there that falls under this question? 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 8. I say 4 out of 8 and simplified is a half. Sorry, I said that was the last question. So this question should actually be number 6. Sorry about that. So there's 6 questions over here. This is now the last question. Okay, so now they say, what is the probability of flipping at least one heads? Now, people, if I say to you, you must bring at least 50 Rand to school tomorrow. Okay, can you bring 100? Yes, because at least 50 includes anything that's above 50. So 50 is the minimum, but anything above that is fine. So what is the probability of flipping at least one heads? So it means, can you flip, so at least one heads? Can you flip more than one heads? Yes. Okay. So at least one. Can you see at least one heads there? Yes, we highlighted. Can you see at least one heads there? Yes, we highlighted. At least one heads there? Yes, we highlighted. And at least one heads there? Yes. Can you see at least one heads there, even though there's more, doesn't matter? Yes, we included. At least one heads? Yes. At least one heads? Yes. So you've got a very, very good chance of at least throwing one heads. Okay. And that would give you 7 out of 8. Same. There you go. And that is it for today. Please copy the tree diagram into your book, label it flipping 3 coins, and then number the questions 1 to 6. Sorry about that. This must be number 6 over there. And write down the questions and also write the answers. And that is it. You must have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching Grade 10. See you tomorrow. Bye.